Have you ever had one of those mornings where the world feels perfectly still? The kind of quiet where the only sound is the whisper of pine needles in the wind and the low hum of your own thoughts. That was my morning. I was standing on my property, a 5-acre slice of peace carved out of the Oregon woods, coffee in hand. The air tasted of damp earth and the faint, clean smell of ozone from a distant dying storm. I'm 52, a former cell tower engineer, and this little kingdom is my retirement, or semi-retirement. My tractor was parked near the shed. It's not just any tractor, it's my project. A beast I'd retrofitted with a custom ground-penetrating radar and a spectrum analyzer. It's my new gig, helping folks map out underground pipes or find lost wellheads. It's honest work, but to some people, it looked like junk. That's when the quiet shattered. The grinding groan of hydraulics and the crunch of heavy tires on my gravel driveway pulled me out of my thoughts. A massive flatbed tow truck was backing onto my land. Its amber lights flashed silently, like a predator's eyes, and right behind it, a pristine white Tesla whispered to a stop. The driver's door opened, and out stepped Chad. Let me tell you about Chad. He was our homeowners association president, 35 maybe, dressed in the kind of athletic wear that costs more than my first car, with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He looked like a man who'd never had dirt under his fingernails in his life. This all happened to me, by the way. And if you're watching Karenology, you know it's never just a simple misunderstanding. "Morning, Paul," he said, his voice smooth and friendly, which is always the first warning sign. "Bit of an issue?" I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the warmth steady my hands. "Looks like you brought the issue with you, Chad. That's my driveway you're blocking." He chuckled, a dry little sound. "That's the thing, we're just tidying up. Your machine," he gestured to my tractor, "violates the new aesthetic covenant, Section 4, Paragraph B, no heavy-duty or agricultural equipment visible from the road." I stared at him. My property line was a good 100 feet from the road, buffered by a thick wall of Douglas firs. You couldn't see my tractor unless you were practically standing on my porch. I've had that tractor for 2 years, Chad. Never been a problem before. Things change, Paul. We're upgrading the community, making it smarter, cleaner. He took a step closer, his eyes scanning my workhorse. Plus, we've had complaints, radio interference, messing with smart home systems. Your antique gear is probably blasting out noise all over the spectrum. That's when I felt the first spark of real anger. Antique gear? I'd spent 6 months building that setup. It was more precise than anything the county used. My equipment is shielded and directional. It's cleaner than the Wi-Fi router in your house. Show me the complaints. He waved a dismissive hand. "It's all on record. The board voted. You were notified." He nodded to the tow truck driver, a big guy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Go ahead, hook it up." The driver started walking toward my tractor. My heart began to pound a heavy, slow drum against my ribs. This wasn't about a covenant or radio waves. This was a power play. Think about that for a second. A man you barely know, telling you what you can and can't have on your own land. If you've ever felt that kind of righteous fire light up in your chest, hit that like button, because you know what's coming next. I put my coffee mug down on the porch rail. "Hold on," I said, my voice low and even. "You're not touching my property." The driver stopped and looked at Chad. Chad's smile finally faltered. He stepped right up to the tractor, peering into the cab. His eyes landed on my father's old army dog tag, hanging from a wire I'd strung over the dash. It was dented and worn, a piece of my personal history, a symbol. "And get this junk out of here too," he sneered, reaching in as if to grab it. That was the moment the switch flipped. Before I knew what I was doing, I was moving. I didn't run, I just walked, fast. I got between him and the cab. "Don't," I said. The word came out like a piece of ice. "You don't touch that, ever." He pulled his hand back, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. He wasn't used to being told no. He looked from my face to the $500,000 machine behind me, a machine he was about to impound. The fine, he informed me, would be $1,000. The impound and storage fees would be another $2,000 easy. And my equipment on the back, that was worth over 25 grand. He was trying to take my livelihood. For a long moment, we just stood there in a silent standoff. The tow driver shuffled his feet. The Tesla hummed. Then Chad's smile returned, but this time it was all teeth. It was a predator's smile, "Have it your way, old-timer," he said, pulling out his phone. He didn't dial 911. He wasn't calling the sheriff. He tapped the screen a few times, his thumb moving with smug precision. A faint blue light illuminated his face. He was starting a war. I just didn't know the first battle would be fought online, and I was about to become its first casualty. Chad's smug little smile was the last thing I saw before I turned my back on him. The tow truck driver was still hesitating, looking between me and his boss. I didn't give him a choice. I walked over to my old Ford pickup, the one I use for hauling parts and groceries, slid into the driver's seat and fired it up. The engine rumbled to life, a comforting, familiar growl. I backed it up slowly, carefully, until its rear bumper was less than a foot from the tow truck's grill. Then I killed the engine, got out, and locked the doors. Stalemate. Chad's face was a picture. For a guy who lived his life through a phone screen, a physical barrier was something he didn't know how to process. "That's your solution?" he scoffed. "You're just delaying the inevitable, Paul. You're making this worse for yourself." I didn't answer. I just walked back to my porch. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a surge of pure, unadulterated adrenaline. I picked up my phone. Time to fight fire with fire. I opened the neighborhood group chat, the one the homeowners association used for everything from announcing potlucks to complaining about garbage cans. I started typing, my thumbs flying across the screen. I laid it out, plain and simple. How Chad was on my property with a tow truck, trying to illegally seize my tractor based on a rule nobody had ever heard of. I attached a photo of my truck blocking his. I hit send. For a second, nothing happened. Then my message simply vanished, just gone. I tried again. I wrote, "Chad is deleting my posts. He's trying to censor me." I hit send. That one disappeared even faster. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Have you ever tried to shout and realized you've lost your voice? It was exactly like that, but in digital form. Then a new post appeared, from Chad. It had a professionally shot photo of his perfect family, all smiling. The caption read, "A friendly reminder about community safety. An older resident, Paul, is operating unlicensed high-power equipment that is causing interference with home security systems and medical devices. When approached, he became aggressive and is now blocking access to our private road. Please be patient as we resolve this situation." The comments started rolling in instantly. "Oh my God, I knew something was wrong with my Wi-Fi," one person wrote. "My mother's heart monitor acted up last week. Is he responsible?" wrote another. It was a cascade of lies, a digital flash flood, and I was drowning in it. This wasn't just a dispute anymore. It was character assassination. Here's what I discovered next, and it's a lesson for everyone. Your reputation, the one you spend a lifetime building, can be destroyed in about 5 minutes by someone with a smartphone and no conscience. My phone buzzed again. An email. It was a notification from the website where I listed my repair services. A new 1-star review had just been posted. "Unprofessional and aggressive," it said. Then another, and another, all from accounts with no history, bots. He was carpet bombing my business. My rating, which had been a solid 4.9 stars for 3 years, was plummeting. 4.5, 3.8, 2.1. My phone buzzed and buzzed, each vibration a nail in my coffin. The flow of calls and emails for new jobs, usually a steady trickle, had stopped completely. He had cut off my income. I looked up from my phone, my vision blurry with rage. Chad was still standing by his Tesla, looking at his own screen, that same smirk plastered on his face. He was enjoying this. He was watching me burn. The tow truck driver had retreated to his cab, clearly wanting no part of this mess. The world had shrunk to this small patch of land. My truck, my home, his silent electric car, me, and the man systematically dismantling my life with his thumb. The silence was back, but now it was different. It wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, charged with the hum of electronics and unspoken violence. I felt a profound sense of loneliness right then. Isolated. Every digital door I tried to open was slammed in my face. My neighbors, people I'd shared a beer with, were being turned against me with a few well-crafted lies. I had built my life on tangible things, on circuits and steel. I knew how to fix things you could hold in your hand, but how do you fix a lie? How do you fight a ghost in the machine? The sun was higher now. casting long shadows across the yard. It felt like hours had passed. Chad finally looked up from his phone, his expression bored, as if he was done playing with his toy. He gave me a little wave, got back in his Tesla, and drove off, leaving the tow truck and its defeated-looking driver to block my driveway. He was leaving me to stew in the mess he'd made. I thought that was the end of it for the day. I was wrong. The real gut punch was yet to come. 10 minutes after Chad left, another car pulled up. This one was official, a county vehicle. A man in a crisp uniform got out, holding a clipboard. He wasn't looking at the truck, he was looking at my workshop. He marched right up to the door and slapped a bright orange sticker on it. He didn't even look at me as he did it. I walked over, my boots crunching on the gravel. The sticker was a stop work order. It read, "Violation of County Code 714, unpermitted commercial operation in a residential zone. All activities must cease immediately. Premises sealed pending inspection." He'd done this. Chad had made one call, not to a tow company, but to a crony in the county office. He hadn't just attacked my reputation and blocked my driveway. He had just locked the doors to my entire life. The orange sticker felt like a brand on my own skin. A stop work order. It was official, ugly, and absolute. The county inspector, a man with a face as gray as his uniform, wouldn't even make eye contact. He just got back in his car and drove away, leaving me standing in the silence, the tow truck a monument to my defeat. You know that feeling when you've been hit and for a second you can't breathe? Your lungs just seize up. That was me. I'd been outmaneuvered at every turn. Chad wasn't just a bully, he was a chess player, and I had been playing checkers. He had used the rules, twisted them, and built a cage around me. My first thought was, I need to get ahead of this. There was a homeowners association meeting scheduled for that evening at the community center. It was supposed to be about choosing new flowers for the entrance roundabout. Now, it was going to be about me. I spent the next few hours preparing. I printed out everything. The original property deeds that showed my land was zoned for small-scale commercial work. The specifications for my radio equipment, proving it was low emission and compliant with FCC regulations. I even printed out a timeline of Chad's actions, the tow truck, the censorship in the chat, the bot attack on my business. I had a folder an inch thick, facts, logic, evidence. I thought it would be enough. What would you do in that situation? Would you have trusted the power of truth? That evening, I walked into the community center. It was a sterile, brightly lit room with beige walls and uncomfortable plastic chairs. And it was packed. Usually these meetings drew a dozen people at most. Tonight, there were 50. No one looked at me. As I walked to the front, I could feel their eyes on my back, a physical weight of judgment. Chad was already there, standing behind a lectern, looking calm and in charge. He was wearing a blazer now, trying to look like a statesman. He gave me a brief, condescending nod. "Paul, glad you could make it. We were just discussing community integrity." When it was my turn to speak, I laid out my case. I was calm, methodical. I presented my documents one by one, my voice steady. "This isn't about radio waves or aesthetics," I said, holding up the printouts of the one-star reviews. "This is a targeted harassment campaign. He's trying to force me out." I showed them the timeline, the deleted messages, the sudden drop in my business rating. I thought the proof was undeniable. I expected gasps, outrage. Instead, I got nothing. Just blank stares. Then Chad stepped up. He didn't even look at my documents. He just leaned into the microphone. "Friends, neighbors," he began, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "I know this is upsetting. We all liked Paul. But the simple fact is, our community is evolving. We're investing in a new state-of-the-art security and home automation system. It's called AuraNet." He clicked a button, and a slick presentation flashed onto the screen behind him. It was full of happy families and smart homes, smiling as they tapped on their phones. AuraNet will connect us all. It will make our homes safer, our lives easier, but it requires a clean, stable network environment. Unfortunately, Mr. Davis's hobby equipment is a risk, a big one. He looked at me, a sad little frown on his face. "As for these papers," he said, gesturing vaguely at my folder, "I'm sure they're very interesting, but honestly, in the 21st century, we don't run our lives on old paper, do we? We trust the network. We trust progress." It was brilliant in a sickening way. He wasn't arguing my facts. He was dismissing them. He was reframing the entire debate. I was the past. He was the future. My evidence was old paper. His was a sleek digital promise. Someone from the audience shouted, "What about the interference, Chad? Is it really dangerous?" "We can't take that chance," Chad said gravely. "A dropped signal could mean a security camera failing, a medical alert not going through. Are we willing to risk a life over one man's rusty tractor?" The room murmured with agreement. He had them. He had painted me as a threat, a stubborn old man standing in the way of safety and progress. I saw it in their faces. The doubt, the fear. My neighbor Tom, a guy I'd helped fix his lawnmower just last month, wouldn't even look at me. He was too busy studying the Oranet brochure. I stood there, holding my useless stack of papers, feeling like a fool. I had brought a knife to a drone fight. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush that spread from my chest to my face. I had been publicly tried and convicted, and my defense hadn't even been heard. As Chad basked in the applause for his new project, a woman in the back of the room, Mavis, the old-school librarian, just watched him. She wasn't clapping. She had this look on her face, a sharp, intelligent skepticism. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. It wasn't pity. It was something else, a question. But it was a fleeting moment. The tide of the room was against me. As the meeting broke up, people avoided me, stepping around me like I was a spill on the floor. I walked out into the cool night air, the sound of their excited chatter about Oranet ringing in my ears. The facts hadn't mattered. The truth hadn't mattered. I got in my truck, the engine turning over with a tired sigh. I had lost. I had lost my business, my reputation, and my community. As I pulled away from the community center, I saw Chad in my rearview mirror, surrounded by a crowd of adoring neighbors. He was laughing, and as he laughed, he nervously twisted a small, dark ring on his finger. It was an odd, twitchy gesture, a detail that didn't fit the picture of the confident leader. I didn't know it then, but that tiny, insignificant detail, that nervous tick, was the first loose thread, the first clue that Chad's perfect digital world was built on a foundation of lies. And I was about to start pulling. That nervous tick of Chad's, the constant twisting of the smart ring on his finger, stuck with me. It was the kind of detail you dismiss at first, but it plants a seed. Confident people are still. Anxious people fidget. And Chad, for all his bravado, was anxious. But about what? I drove home that night under a starless sky, the weight of the meeting pressing down on me. I was an outcast. My workshop was sealed, my business was dead, and my tractor was still held hostage by a tow truck in my own driveway. I felt utterly powerless. I sat in my truck for a long time, just listening to the engine idle, the dashboard lights casting a pale green glow. For the first time in a long time, I had no idea what to do next. The next morning brought no relief, just the same tow truck, a silent metal vulture waiting outside. I was trapped. It felt like a siege. My phone was a graveyard of dead-end calls to county offices, each one redirecting me to a voicemail or an indifferent bureaucrat. It was a perfectly designed system of frustration. But then, something unexpected happened. A small, unassuming sedan pulled into my driveway, parking behind the tow truck. A young man got out. He looked to be in his mid-20s, wearing a neat but nondescript polo shirt and slacks. He looked like an intern, someone you'd barely notice. I recognized him from the back of the meeting room. He walked up to my porch, a hesitant look on his face. "Mr. Davis, Paul?" he asked. "My name is Ryan. I'm with the state's Communications Commission." I braced myself for another citation, another fine. "Let me guess," I said, my voice heavy with sarcasm. "You're here to confiscate my toaster for broadcasting illegal signals." He didn't smile. "No, sir, I'm off the clock. Unofficially. I was at the meeting last night. I heard what you said about your equipment, and I saw your readings." He glanced around as if worried someone was listening. "The thing is, you're right. It's not you." I stared at him. It was the first time in 48 hours that someone had believed me. "What do you mean it's not me?" "We've been tracking a signal in this area for a few weeks," he said, lowering his voice. "It's a low-power, wide-spectrum broadcast, highly encrypted. It's not commercial. It's not amateur radio. To be honest, it looks, well, It looks military grade, a mesh network, the kind that's designed to be invisible. A mesh network. The term clicked in my head. A decentralized system where every node talks to every other node, creating a resilient, self-healing web. Powerful stuff. The kind of thing you use for battlefield communications, not for telling you when your milk has expired. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my suspicions still on high alert. "Why risk your job?" Ryan looked down at his shoes. "My grandfather was a ham radio operator, built his own rigs from scratch. He taught me that the airwaves belong to everyone. What your HOA is doing, what Chad is doing, it's wrong. They're using this interference as a pretext. He's lying." He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. "That AuraNet system he's pushing, I think it's the source of the signal. I think he's already built his ghost network all over this neighborhood." The pieces started to click into place. The complaints of interference weren't real. They were manufactured. It was all a marketing campaign, designed to create a problem that only his product, AuraNet, could solve. Have you ever had a moment of clarity so sharp it almost hurts? Where the whole confusing mess suddenly snaps into a simple, ugly picture. "But I can't prove it," Ryan continued, his voice tight with frustration. "Officially, my hands are tied. The signal is encrypted. Without a warrant, I can't get close enough to any of the hardware. But you live here, and you have the gear." He nodded toward my silent, sealed workshop. A new kind of energy started to burn through my exhaustion. It wasn't just about my tractor anymore. It wasn't just about my business. This was bigger. Chad wasn't just a petty tyrant in a blazer. He was running a sophisticated scam, a techno heist on an entire community. Stick around, and if you're getting a feel for this, maybe drop a subscription. You're going to want to see how this ends. Ryan gave me a couple of leads, online forums where ex-military comms specialists discuss these kinds of networks. He couldn't give me anything official, just a nudge in the right direction. He was a good kid, caught between his conscience and his career. As he left, he turned back. "Be careful, Mr. Davis. These guys play for keeps." The moment his car was gone, I felt a shift inside me. The despair was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. I was an engineer, a problem solver, and Chad had just handed me the most interesting problem of my career. But first, I had to get into my workshop. I walked over to the door, the orange sticker glaring at me like an evil eye. Breaking that seal was a felony. But all my best tools were in there. My spectrum analyzer, my diagnostic software, everything I needed to hunt this ghost. I was standing there, contemplating my next move, when a car crunched up the driveway. It was my neighbor, Isaac, an IT guy who lived 2 houses down. He was one of the people who had avoided my gaze at the meeting, but now he looked pale and nervous. He got out of his car, wringing his hands. "Paul," he stammered. "Paul, I need to talk to you. I did something stupid." Isaac looked like a man on his way to his own execution. He was sweating, despite the cool autumn air, and his eyes darted around nervously. He was a quiet guy, worked from home doing something with databases. We weren't close, but we were friendly. We'd borrow tools, wave when we passed. Now, he looked like a complete stranger. I messed up, Paul," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It's about the network, the AuraNet thing." I just waited, my arms crossed. I had a feeling I knew where this was going. Chad came to me a couple of months ago, he confessed, staring at the gravel. He offered me $500 a month, tax-free. All I had to do was let him install a small box in my basement, a signal booster, he called it, for the new network. He said it was totally harmless, just a way to improve coverage for everyone. $500 a month. That was the price of his loyalty. I felt a surge of contempt so strong it almost choked me. He had sold out his neighbor, his community, for the price of a car payment. "Let me guess," I said, my voice flat. "The signal booster is in your basement right now, isn't it? That's the source of the ghost signal." He nodded miserably. "It's more than a booster. It's a server rack, small but powerful. I saw it when they installed it. I didn't understand what it was then, but after last night, Paul, he's building his network on our properties, without our permission." Here it was, the physical proof, the smoking gun. It was sitting in a basement 200 yards from where I stood. "Show me," I said. "I can't," he whispered, his face ashen. "He has a camera on it. He gets an alert if the basement door is opened without his code. He told me if I ever touched it or talked about it, he'd ruin me. He said he knows where my wife works. He said he has friends. The threat was vague, but chilling. Chad wasn't just a scammer, he was a thug in a Tesla. He was using intimidation to keep his pawns in line. But I can turn it off, Isaac pleaded. I can go in and just pull the plug. He'll know it was me, but at least it'll be over. Please, Paul, don't tell anyone. Just let me fix it. I looked at him, this weak, terrified man who had betrayed me for a few $100. Part of me wanted to watch him burn, but another part, the practical engineer, saw an opportunity. It was a mistake, a big one, trusting a man who had already proven he couldn't be trusted. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you thought was on your side, even peripherally? It leaves a scar. Okay, Isaac, I said slowly. Go, pull the plug. We'll say there was a power surge, but you owe me. You owe me big. He looked relieved, almost giddy. He practically ran back to his car and sped off. I watched him go, a sour taste in my mouth. I had just made a deal with a snake. I told myself it was strategic. If the signal went down, it would prove it wasn't coming from my equipment. It would be my first real piece of leverage. I waited. An hour passed, then 2. I kept scanning the airwaves with a small, handheld detector I had in my truck. The ghost signal remained, a steady, unwavering hum in the ether. He hadn't done it. Or he'd tried and failed. Or, worst of all, he had walked right back to Chad and told him everything. The answer came not as a phone call, but in the form of another official-looking vehicle. This one wasn't from the county. It was a fire marshal's truck. A stern-faced woman in a navy blue uniform marched up my driveway, her expression grim. She didn't introduce herself. She just pointed at my workshop. We received an anonymous tip about an electrical fire hazard, unsafe wiring, overloaded circuits, improper storage of flammable materials. We're doing an emergency inspection. It was a phantom complaint, another lie sent down the wire by Chad. Isaac had run straight to him. He hadn't just betrayed me once. He'd done it again, setting me up for another fall. This was escalation ladder. 101, when one attack fails, launch another from a different direction. First, it was the homeowners association rules, then the county codes, now the fire marshal. There's no hazard, I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking with rage. I'm a certified engineer. That workshop is safer than your office. She ignored me, walking to the door with the orange sticker. The law requires me to inspect any potential imminent danger. If you interfere, I'll have the sheriff's office remove you. She broke the seal. I had to stand there and watch as she went through my life's work, my sanctuary. She had a checklist, and she was determined to find violations. A can of lubricant stored too close to a power outlet. A stack of old schematics that were a potential fuel source. An extension cord that wasn't the right gauge for outdoor use. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts. Each tiny ticky-tack violation was another nail. After 30 minutes, she came out, her face grim. Your workshop is a disaster, Mr. Davis. Multiple code violations. I'm declaring it unsafe for occupancy. It's to remain sealed until you can bring in a licensed contractor to bring the entire structure up to code. She slapped another, bigger, redder sticker over the first one. This one said, condemned. Condemned. The word echoed in the quiet afternoon. It was absolute, final. My workshop, my tools, my last line of defense, all locked away behind a door I couldn't legally open. I looked down the street toward Isaac's house. His curtains were drawn. He was hiding. Chad had won. He had used my neighbor's weakness to neutralize me completely. I was isolated, my business was gone, my workshop was condemned, and I had absolutely no way to fight back. I was at rock bottom. Everything seemed lost. And that, right there, is where the real story begins. For a full day, I did nothing. I just sat on my porch, watching the red condemned sticker on my workshop door. It felt like staring at a tombstone. The tow truck was still there, a constant reminder of my failure. The silence of my phone was a constant reminder of my isolation. I was in checkmate. Every move I could think of was blocked. What do you do when you've truly hit a wall, when every door is locked and you don't have a key? That night, I couldn't sleep. I found myself rummaging through a dusty old footlocker in the back of my closet. It was full of my dad's things from his time in the Army. Old photos, letters, his service medals. And at the bottom, his old field radio manual. It was a thick dog-eared book, smelling of dust and time. As I idly flipped through the pages, my eyes landed on his dog tag, the one I kept in my tractor. It was lying on my nightstand. I picked it up, the metal cool against my skin. I'd looked at it 1,000 times, but I'd never really seen it. Name, rank, serial number, and underneath, a shorter string of characters. SIGINT 7B, Signal Intelligence. It wasn't just his unit, it was his specialty. That's when it hit me. An idea so simple and so crazy it just might work. I couldn't get to my advanced equipment in the workshop, but my tractor, the very thing that started this whole mess, was still sitting right there. Its power supply was independent, and its core systems, the radar and the analyzer, were hardwired. They couldn't be shut down remotely. He'd tried to take my weapon, and in doing so, he'd left it right on the battlefield. I spent the rest of the night in the cab of my tractor, hunched over my laptop, the green glow of the screen illuminating my face. I couldn't use my fancy software, but I had something better. My dad's old knowledge. I started writing a new piece of code, a simple brute force program based on the decryption algorithms from his old manual. It was archaic, clunky, but it was designed to do one thing: listen. Not just to detect a signal, but to interpret its patterns, its language. By dawn, I had something. The Ghost Network wasn't just broadcasting, it was communicating. It sent out a constant ping, a sort of digital roll call to every node in the network, and every node pinged back. It was a heartbeat. And I realized something crucial. Chad's smart ring, the one he was always twisting, wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was the master key. It was the device that sent the command codes. When he fidgeted with it, he was likely checking the network status. My new program couldn't break the encryption, but it could see the data packets. They were small, but they were constant. And they were flowing from every house where he'd installed a booster. The network wasn't just waiting to be activated. It was already active. It was already listening. I couldn't see what it was collecting, but I could prove that it was collecting something from everyone, all the time. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I cross-referenced the network map with the public schedule on the town's website. Chad had organized a big community investment evening for the next night. It was being held in the high school gymnasium. He was going to pitch Oranet to local bigwigs and investors, trying to get the funding to take his scam to the next level. The gymnasium, a big open space, full of people, full of devices, and I was willing to bet, wired to the gills with the school's own network. I now had a plan. It was reckless. It was theatrical. It was probably illegal in a dozen different ways, but it was all I had left. I wasn't going to fight him with paperwork or complaints anymore. I was going to fight him with physics. I spent the rest of the day making preparations. I modified my tractor's antenna to be highly directional. I jury-rigged a connection from my laptop to a small, powerful projector I had in the house. I downloaded the floor plans for the high school, noting the location of every network port and power outlet. As evening approached, a cold calm settled over me. This was it, the point of no return. I climbed into the cab of my tractor, the engine turning over with a familiar roar. I looked at the red sticker on my workshop, at the silent tow truck. They were symbols of my defeat, but tonight I was going to turn my prison into a battering ram. I put the tractor in gear, but I didn't drive toward the road. I drove across my own lawn, my heavy tires leaving deep tracks in the manicured grass I was supposed to keep pristine. I drove right through the flimsy decorative fence that marked my property line, the one the homeowners association was so proud of. The sound of splintering wood was the sweetest music I'd ever heard. I was no longer defending. I was attacking. I was taking my war and my tractor directly to Chad's front door. The investment meeting was about to get a keynote speaker it never expected. The high school gymnasium was buzzing. It was filled with the most influential people in town, business owners, local politicians, wealthy retirees. They were all sipping wine from plastic cups, nibbling on cheese cubes, and listening intently as Chad, looking sharp in a tailored suit, stood on a makeshift stage. A huge projection screen behind him displayed the Oranet logo. He was in his element, a master showman selling a beautiful dream. Oranet isn't just a product, he was saying, his voice resonating with passion. It's a promise of security, a promise of connectivity, a promise of a better, safer future for our community. The audience was eating it up. They were nodding, captivated by the slick presentation and the allure of effortless, futuristic living. No one noticed the low, distant rumble, a sound that was slowly getting louder. No one noticed until the big double doors at the back of the gymnasium burst open and enrolled my tractor. The room went silent. 100 faces turned in unison, their expressions a mixture of shock, confusion, and fear. I drove it right onto the polished basketball court, its muddy tires leaving a trail of defiance. I stopped right in the middle of the floor, the engine idling like a growling beast. The headlights cut through the dim lighting, pinning Chad to the stage like a cornered animal. 2 hired security guards started moving toward me, but they hesitated. What exactly do you do with a tractor in a gymnasium? I didn't get out. I just sat in my cab, my laptop glowing in front of me. I had already patched into the school's Wi-Fi. With a single keystroke, I hijacked their projector. The Oranet logo behind Chad vanished, replaced by the raw, ugly truth. My screen. On it was a swirling, chaotic visualization of the network traffic my program was capturing. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice booming through a small speaker I'd hooked up. "Sorry to interrupt. Chad, you've been talking about your promise. I'd like to give everyone a demonstration." Chad's face was pale. "Security! Get him out of here!" he shrieked. "This network isn't a promise for the future," I continued, ignoring him. "It's already active. It's been active for weeks. And it's not just providing security, it's collecting data." I focused my directional antenna on a man in the front row, the owner of the town's largest car dealership. On the screen, a new window popped up, showing a string of data packets. I couldn't read them, but I could describe them. "Right now," I said, "Oranet is logging the MAC address of your phone. It's recording every Wi-Fi network you connect to. It knows you were at the country club this afternoon and the coffee shop this morning." A murmur went through the crowd. I swung the antenna toward another woman, a well-known lawyer. "And you, ma'am," I said. "It's logging your search history. You spent 20 minutes on a medical website this morning, looking up symptoms for high blood pressure. How's that for privacy?" Panic began to ripple through the room. This was the live test, the non-documentary evidence. I wasn't showing them paper, I was showing them their own lives, stripped bare and turned into data points. "He's lying!" Chad yelled, his voice cracking. "It's a trick! Fake data!" "Is it?" I answered calmly. I turned the antenna toward the stage, directly at him. "Then let's look at your data, Chad." And then I showed them the most damning evidence of all. The packets flowing from his own devices weren't just being collected. They were being bundled and sent to a single, external IP address, an address I had traced just an hour earlier. "You're not just collecting this data," I said, my voice dropping. "You're selling it, every bit of it, to a data broker in another country. Your neighbor's privacy, their security, their lives. It's all just a product for you to sell to the highest bidder." The room erupted. It was chaos. The investors, the politicians, they all looked at Chad with horror and disgust. They weren't just potential customers anymore. They were victims. Chad stood frozen, his digital empire crumbling around him in real time. His confident mask was gone, replaced by the face of a scared, cornered con man. He fumbled with his smart ring, twisting it frantically, but it was too late. The ghost was out of the machine. That's when Mavis, the librarian, who had been standing quietly at the back, made a call. Within minutes, the flashing lights weren't from a tow truck. They were from the sheriff's office. They arrested Chad right there on the stage. As they led him away in handcuffs, he looked at me, his eyes filled with a pure, unadulterated hatred that was more satisfying than any apology. The aftermath was messy. The homeowners association was disbanded. The condemned sticker was removed from my workshop. The tow truck quietly disappeared from my driveway. A few weeks later, I was approached by a major tech security firm. They'd heard about what I'd done. They offered me a staggering amount of money for my code and my expertise. It was my ethical fork in the road. I could have taken the money, bought a new tractor, a new house, a new life. But I turned them down. Instead, I took all the data I had collected on the Oranet, the proof of the scam, and deleted it. I wiped the drive clean in front of a new community meeting. Then I took my dad's old dog tag, the symbol of my fight, and I hung it on the door of my workshop. It was a reminder, not of the fight I'd won, but of the peace I'd earned. My life isn't as quiet as it used to be. People in town look at me differently now. I'm the tractor guy, the local techno sheriff. They come to me with their problems, big and small. I lost my anonymity. I lost my quiet retirement. That was the price. But I saved my home. I saved my community. And sometimes that's a trade worth making. I sleep pretty well at night. And my tractor? It sits right where it belongs. On my own land, under my own rules.